Good morning and welcome everyone to the SES Showcase session entitled Empower Your Capabilities. We very much welcome everyone to the session, though we'd prefer to be with you in person. We look forward to when that will be possible. We're delighted to have you join us virtually, however, and to hear about services coming up in 2022 on our newest capabilities, our newest satellites, SES-17, which just launched last month, and the O3b Empower constellation, each of which is bringing massive throughput, flexibility, and scale to the region. I'd like to introduce my colleagues on the panel. They are Diego Paldao, who is a senior sales manager for O3b Empower. He is based in Washington, D.C., and currently focused on commercial development of SES O3b Empower with service commencing in the fourth quarter of 2022. Diego has more than 25 years experience in the global telecom industry, beginning in 1997 while at UUNet. After spending his early satellite years with SES, Diego joined NewSat, an Australian teleport service provider now part of Speedcast. And in November 2017, Diego joined the OneWeb team at a critical phase of that company's growth into mainstream discussions about bridging the digital divide. Diego added additional LEO experience as part of SpaceX's Starlink commercial team before rejoining SES, where he's still NGSO focused and is an invaluable resource for us in launching our multi-orbit solutions. And our next colleague also joining us will be Tashunka Jensen, who's a senior specialist in sales for our Empower team. Tashunka has worked in the satellite communications industry for close to 10 years. Prior to that, he was responsible for SES sales in Western Europe. And right now, he's responsible for exploring new markets and partnerships for Empower, our second generation MEO system. So what we'd like to do is just to get us all oriented towards where we're going with SES, to start with a really short video on SES-17. And Diego will join us for a chat about that right after. Through it, we can see that we're already expanding the number of places that we can expect high throughput connectivity. Could you briefly describe how SES-17 service offerings will differ from our existing offerings based on our enhanced capabilities for SES-17?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Suzanne. Happy to. Look forward to the questions we get from the audience to address anything we don't cover in these few minutes at the beginning here. But satellite has always had this superpower of reach to sort of complement the fiber that already exists. And SES has always been about leveraging satellite communications to connect those unconnected areas, really. Today we have over 75 MEO and GEO satellites. And what's great about SES-17 is the capabilities that it brings to the market is not just more capacity, which is always necessary, which we always need more of, but really the flexibility of the payload that allows us to, have over 200 spot beams to increase the capacity capabilities of use cases such as distance learning, remote medicine, disaster recovery, and of course, consumer broadband. Particularly looking forward to all of our partners in the region that are going to help us sort of leverage all this capacity and capability of the satellite.
Great. And one particular question that I had was, will these new capabilities change what individual countries or customers are used to seeing in satellite infrastructure? For example, terminals or in ground equipment or facilities that we have?
Yeah, I think we'll see some changes for sure. I mean, certainly the industry and SES in particular is continually evolving, innovating and designing more efficient and more useful payloads for our satellites. And with SES 17, the increased power is going to result in the ability of customers to not only use existing ground infrastructure, but really smaller antennas, higher throughput. And that's, I think, really key to helping bridge the digital divide in the region, right? Because particularly for mobile backhaul and rural areas, we're really moving towards an area where we can develop a flat panel technology, right? So for those of you that are familiar, we're talking about a sort of extra large pizza size antenna that's fixed, electronically steered, and we've made investments in these areas. So the ability to install these antennas onto towers, onto buildings, and things like that is really going to change the landscape, literally, by still allowing to use existing and proven technology in the Ka-band antenna spectrum. So we've actually invested in companies that are developing this technology. One in particular is the ability for one of these antennas to support a multi-orbit function, right? So accessing both GEO and MEO satellites from the SES family not only allows them additional resiliency, but it will allow the customers, especially in consumer broadband and medicine, in government, the ability to better and more intelligently route traffic through the satellite that's better suited for that capacity. Not sure if you can see in this slide, but because of the design of the satellite, we're going to have over 10 ground locations to access the satellite. And in particular for Mexico, we're going to have up to 3 locations, which really allows us to more efficiently use the spectrum. And that'll be critical in helping get capacity to the more remote locations, and really help bridge the digital divide by more efficiently using our spectrum.
Thanks. And could we see the next slide, please?
Yeah, and here we highlight some of the sort of the existing and future use cases we hope to enable, right? There's never a lack of need for satellite capacity. The rural locations where it's agriculture or disaster recovery, or even exploration or distance learning, continues to be really the best area for SES and SES's partners to grow. And the capacity we're bringing onto the market with SES 17 is to be critical. SES 17 is the first GEO satellite of SES that will be fully integrated into our MEO O3b mPOWER system, which again will help that multi-orbit resiliency solution that we talked about earlier. And the reduced cost and reduced size of these smaller antennas in the future, again, it's going to help mobile backhaul providers access new markets, test out new areas, really get connectivity to where it's needed, and then later on, if needed, deliver that connectivity with fiber. So we're really looking forward to complementing the existing development going on in the region.
You mentioned fiber. What is the relationship of the deployment of this kind of satellite with these capabilities with fiber, as I see you have on this slide?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly satellite and fiber have always had a love-hate relationship, but SES, we certainly see satellites complementary to fiber. We see it as a quick-to-deploy solution. Even if you're going to be putting fiber in somewhere, you can typically get a satellite connection installed much more quickly. And then your antenna can stay there as a resiliency or redundancy play. But I think with SES 17 and O3b mPOWER coming up, we're no longer talking low throughput. We're talking hundreds of megabits. And with our NGSO O3b system, we're talking low latency. which will enable cloud applications and voice traffic that we'll touch on a little bit later.
Great. Any other aspects that you'd like to focus on here? I see we've got rural extension as part of our sort of enterprise solutions. How would we expect that to play out?
Yeah, I mean, certainly with SES-17 and other satellites we have, it's, again, more capacity is always better, but more efficient capacity allows us to reach more areas. With SES-17's spectrum allocation, the multiple ground stations we're going to be enabling and setting up, it's really going to allow us to reach corners that even before with satellite we couldn't quite reach efficiently. We're going to be able to tailor solutions to our clients, and working with our in-region partners, whether they're ISPs or integrators or telcos. I think we have a great opportunity to really make an impact in bridging the digital divide in the region, particularly in those remote rural areas which continue to lag behind other parts.
Great. I want to, we may have more questions hopefully in the chat on SES-17, but I want to make sure that we get to empower. What we should emphasize is that SES-17 has just launched successfully last month. So you'll be hearing more about SES-17 in the coming months as we move closer to the in-service date. I'd like to bring up now my colleague Tashunka Jensen to talk a little bit more about O3b Empower. Hi Tashunka, how are you today? So
hi Suzanne, all good here, thank you. How about you?
Great. So to start off, I'd like to just start off by sort of setting the folks are probably really familiar with the traditional geostationary markets, but MEO has been around for a while. Actually, we were the first commercial NGSO system out in the market. But it'd be interesting to sort of set the stage for what's coming by talking about how MEO customers are using our service today. Could you sort of give us an example?
Yes, happy to start going there. So just to set the scene a little bit, because I'm not sure if everybody on the audience is familiar with medium Earth orbit services. The medium Earth orbit satellites, they fly or they orbit, so to speak, at 8,000 kilometers distance from the Earth. They move from our perspective, so you need to do a dual antenna terminal to follow them. And the great benefits which they bring, and which is also the reason why we as SES decided to invest in medium Earth orbit, is they provide high throughput, so we can go today all the way up to 1.5 gigabits of capacity, and they have lower latency than traditional geostationary satellites, which is 150 milliseconds round trip. So these are the benefits in short. Of course, there's much more, which I'm happy to talk with anybody about at a different forum, but these are the benefits in short. So when you ask me about what type of services do we provide today in medium Earth orbit, it's important also to understand, okay, what does the latency actually mean? So if you look at this small slide here, you can see that most applications that enterprises and businesses use today can be served when they're under 200 milliseconds of latency. That we're talking here about cloud services, ERP systems, etc. And all these applications can work very well on the medium Earth orbit constellation. Unfortunately, not all of them work very well on the geostationary satellites yet. So, and that's just simply the rules of physics. No, when you have a higher latency, not all applications will work well. So this is mainly the reason why we chose for medium Earth orbit services. But when you ask me what services do we provide today, I have a few beautiful examples. For example, we provide services to cruise liners when we can follow ships around with a beam, and we're providing 1.2 gigabits of capacity to what actually is a floating city. A cruise line is the perfect example for a future smart city. It's a city with more than 8,000 people there, constantly making pictures, using the internet, uploading services, uploading pictures, of course, a lot, and that's what people like to do when they're on holiday. So consuming a lot of capacity. Our services have enabled and specifically allowed these services to be used. Another thing which we're doing today is very much looking how can we connect the unconnected with true carrier grade services. Some of you might have been looking at the press releases prior to this presentation, and you can see that we're starting a test on the other side of the earth with the government of Kazakhstan, a test to connect unconnected villages. And the reason I want to mention is that in Kazakhstan, we have to deal with very harsh environments. We have temperatures of minus 20 degrees Celsius. We have a lot of mountains terrain. We're at a very low elevation. So that if something works there, it can work almost everywhere. And what we provide there are 500 million megabit services to communities which were not connected before. Another example, which is a little bit closer to home here for the audience, is disaster recovery, which we provided, for example, not too long ago in 2017 in Peru, in collaboration with the Google Loon project, which many people might remember, with the balloons that could provide connectivity. Here we restored LTE services for Peru after the floodings in an instant, and through LTE 4G services. So those are just a few of the examples, and one of the examples which I also would not like to take away or not mention is the example of how we can be integrated with 5G today. So we have been testing our medium Earth orbit services with some of the larger North American mobile network operators, and we have actually established that satellite and specifically medium Earth orbit can be part of the 5G ecosystem.
Great, Sugar. Thanks for those examples. One of the things about Empower that's different from what we can do right now with Classic is that we'll be able to have an exponentially greater reach and flexibility because of the digital payload and the electronic steering of the beams. When we think about these capabilities, what market segments or services do you see being addressed specifically in this region by using these new Empower capabilities?
Well, looking at the picture here, you can see that there's a few segments where we see true enhancements possible, because some of these services are already served by medium Earth orbit today, but including the Empower capabilities, as you stated, will kind of boost the capabilities which we have already on medium Earth orbit. Empower will be having steerable beams and also beams that can be dimensioned in power. So it actually could mean that we can have beams with much less capacity than the medium Earth orbit today, which could be 50 megabits, but also much more. We can go all the way up to 10 gigabits of capacity. So you can imagine what that could mean, for example, for disaster recovery and public protection. If something happens, God forbid, but hey, things happen every day, we can reconnect certain regions with true carrying grade capacity. When you look at, for example, a mine, if you want to have a fully automated mine, we can provide real services, and a fully automated mine also means that you will have less casualties because you will have less people working on the mine itself. Everybody's also talking about Industry 4.0 today with all the robotics, all the IoT, all these capabilities, which are consuming a lot of capacity and will consume even more capacity. If you want to have such a location with true resilient capabilities, you will need to put satellite into the mix as well. If you have factories in remote locations where, imagine what's happening now with COVID, people need to stay confined within their own area. You need to have workforce around in these areas. We can connect the unconnected and the remote sites at an instant, and we can keep them connected. So these are things that will play a role in the future. And I really think that real increase of capacity of Empower can also help mobile network operators to connect there and oblige with their coverage obligations much quicker. They will not need to have to wait for fiber or for other terrestrial capabilities to be built. They will be able to connect the region in an instant just by putting an Empower terminal there. And in the meantime, they can actually build and extend their own fiber network on the ground. And once we can connect the remote location also through terrestrial means, we can use the Empower connection as a resilient connection, or we can move it to a new region. I hope that answers the question a little bit. Otherwise, I'm happy to dive a little bit further into it.
No, that did, Guy, and I realized it would be helpful if we could see a really short video of Empower capabilities before we move to the question and answer session. So if that's possible to queue up now.
It's almost an unfair advantage. Your network without limitations. Driving business opportunities and performance everywhere. With accelerated, extended capabilities. Now you can reach the unreachable. Supplement existing networks. Expand cellular services. Faster, more reliably, easily, and without risk. Deliver high-performance cloud and data applications through a system that scales as your capabilities and customer base grow. Together, in your bold new future, the advantage is yours with O3B Empower. Reimagine your success story.
So Tishanka, that goes to your last point about mobile network operators and telcos and how they can use the capacity for O3B Empower. If we could bring back Diego so that we're ready to take any questions from the audience. I'll just give a moment for folks to tee up questions in the chat if they have them. And if not, there's one more question I'd like to pose to both Diego and to Shunka, which is in SES, we've made a big effort to be very active listeners with our customers and partners with our customers. So one question is, what are you hearing from our customers about what they would like to see from these systems in the future?
I can go first, I think. I think what we're hearing is there's certainly a need for more connectivity. And I think it's up to the industry to do a good job of educating those interested parties in the differences, right? There's a lot of talk about GEO, LEO, and MEO. And I think it's important for us as an industry to be clear about those differences. Because not every system or every orbit is the right solution for every problem. So I think everyone out there is happy to get more capacity, happy to get more capabilities. As I mentioned earlier, SES's focus has always been about satellite connectivity, satellite communications. That's always our focus, what we're doing today. And I think we're getting positive feedback from those customers, those companies, those clients about having a partner like SES. Where that is our only focus, delivering solutions, both at a GEO orbit with larger beams but lower latency, as well as a MEO orbit with higher throughput and lower latency. So the multi-orbit solution seems to be resonating well, especially for telcos and mobile backhaul providers and enterprise clients.
Thanks, Diego.
If I might add to that a little bit, so thank you, Diego. What I would like to add there is that we constantly also hear that our customers value flexibility. And with flexibility, I mean the capability of dynamically allocating capacity depending to the demand of the customer. No? So with Empower, that will be possible. And in the past, this was possible with lower bandwidths, when we were talking about reallocating a few megabits. But now within the Empower era, there will be a capability of truly looking at the demand of a site and dynamically allocating to another site of the same customer more or less capacity depending on the demand at that exact time. So I think that's something that the market was demanding in the past, and it's something that we will be delivering in the future as well at a wider scale.
So thanks. So I think I don't see any questions in the chat. I think we're ready to wrap up quite shortly, but I did want to mention for our audience that all of these applications are dependent on a very stable regulatory environment, which we've enjoyed in the region for a long time. This is a satellite savvy region of administration. So that's been great. But part of that stable regulatory environment is spectrum. And these are very high throughput applications, basically to replicate in places where they don't exist or to link remote areas with urban areas. So I know that my colleagues share the view that we really depend on continued access to amounts of spectrum that support this kind of complementary application for terrestrial networks, and that access to spectrum for new applications and for what we already have invested in. And these systems represent really significant investments and our confidence that there's a need for this in the region. There's a question in the chat. Will the gateway beams of O3b satellites, where will they be located? Or are they fixed? And I'm fairly sure that, not being the engineer, and I think my colleagues might be, that they are not, that they are fixed in certain sites or certain gateway sites, but they're otherwise quite flexible. Would one of you like to take that? Maybe Diego?
Sure. I can add a little bit to that. So I think it's one of the great capabilities of O3b mPOWER, right? That that any site can connect to any site. Any beam or circuit can be a gateway beam. So really it adds tremendous flexibility for the clients, particularly if our clients, especially the mobile operators or the telcos or the enterprise clients, want to have the gateway hardware at their own location to be directly connected to their network and be on net. That is an option that will be available with mPOWER, which is, again, increasing flexibility. Tashunka, something to add there?
I believe you summarized it quite well. To be honest, of course, from the start, we will be offering also gateway services, and we will have our gateways where we actually are connected to all the main cloud providers, so they will be co-located with us. Something which I think is important to mention as well. But of course, there will be a capability of having your own private gateway, accessing your own private network, as you mentioned.
As Tashunka mentioned, he's referring to connectivity agreements that we have in place with Microsoft Azure, with AWS Direct Connect. And these are common across the industry, actually, to integrate satellite networks into terrestrial networks, make them seamless and complementary. If there are no more questions in the chat, again, I will be on a panel later where we'll be talking in more detail about millimeter wave spectrum in particular. Both of these systems, SES-17 and O3b mPOWER, are exclusively in the Ka band. So that millimeter wave session is really important. And the continued ability of the satellite community, to rely on that spectrum continues to be important as we amp up our ability to deliver high throughput. So I thank my colleagues, Diego and Tashunka, very much for joining me today. And to close out, we'll show a short video. Thanks, everyone.
Demand for data is growing exponentially everywhere. By 2023, almost 30 billion devices will be online. However, internet access is different for everyone. Meet escalating global demand for data connectivity with a flexible satellite network that scales with you. Help close the digital divide by connecting people and generating new opportunities. Enable economic growth without costly and time-consuming terrestrial build-outs by extending networks to infrastructure and industry. Inevitably, networks experience outages. Do you have the resiliency to restore services quickly? Because when disaster strikes, speed and efficiency matter. We provide a vital backup for the restoration and recovery period. With O3b mPOWER, you can extend your network and reach every possible demand. Future-proof your cloud-based solutions by leveraging our direct connections with leading cloud service providers. Meet demand for improved efficiency, safety, and uptime with remote infrastructure operations. enable evolving markets with smart monitoring and predictive analytics, or bring telemedicine and essential services to hard-to-reach locations. Only O3b mPOWER trunking can deliver up to 1.5 gigabits per second throughput with less than 150 milliseconds of round-trip latency, providing a fiber-like experience to the services that need it most. O3b mPOWER. Reimagine your success story.